Alright, so Borderlands 4 just launched, and to be honest, I was actually quite excited about this. It was a very highly anticipated launch for me because the last Borderlands game that I enjoyed was Borderlands 2, and I was really hoping that Borderlands 4 would be returned to form. Yes, I'm not a paid journalist, I'm just using that term. Anyway, so today we're going to be having a look at its performance on the PS5. We'll be comparing quality mode versus performance mode, and then also I'll be inserting some PC performance numbers as well. I did a full benchmark on the RTX 5080, but more about that later. So without any further ado, let's get right to the performance benchmarks of the PS5. Alright, so starting off with the PS5 in performance mode, I just have to add a disclaimer. I'm using TR drop and then virtual dub for my lossless recordings, and it might not be as accurate as Digital Foundry's analysis, but it is quite close. I do verify my results by testing it with a PC, right, to see that whatever we have on MSI Afterburner gets reflected on Teardrop, and it's pretty close, right? It's not 100%, but I'd say it's about 95% there. That said, in performance mode, the PS5 is actually able to maintain 60 frames per second 99.9% of the time in the test that I ran. So yeah, you can see there's a bit of a dip there. That's actually noticeable while playing, and then the frame rate, there's a dropped frame, so we dropped down to 59 frames per second. And then in this specific settlement area, there were one or two dropped frames as well, but really overall it does quite well. You can see, we'll just have a look, we'll overlook the whole area now, and you'll see there would be a frame drop there as well. But overall, I'd say that visual to performance, I think it's actually quite okay. I'm using a 4K 60 Hertz monitor for all my recordings, and I actively look at that monitor whilst recording as well. And I have to say, it really doesn't look terrible, and we get a solid 60 frames per second experience with very minimal frame time variations. Now, quality mode is a little bit different. Yeah, you can see we do have quite a big stutter there. Frame time spike up to about 70 milliseconds and a frame rate drop to around 28 frames per second. But for the rest of the benchmark, it's been quite stable. Not 100% locked 30 frames per second, but just judging based on the visuals versus performance, for me personally, I would recommend just playing on performance mode, right? For me, I sit about 3 meters, 9+ feet away from my TV, and at that distance, I really struggle to see a difference between performance mode and quality mode, unless I really look very closely. But just playing the game sitting at that distance, performance mode 60 frames per second is actually a very, very good experience. You can see even in this area here, 30 frames per second locked, quite stable frame times, and I think there was one additional hitch somewhere around here, but the hitches were very minimal, or the frame drops were very minimal. And this I also verified with other channels' performance numbers. So rest assured, the numbers are pretty accurate for this one. Now, unfortunately, I do not have resolution numbers for you. I do not do resolution counting, pixel counting. But yeah, we compare quality mode versus performance mode, just standing still. You can see there's quite a bit of shimmering there under the trees. And then if we move over to performance mode, that shimmering actually persists, but both actually have quite a lot of shimmering when it comes to the crosshair, right? Now, just have a look at how long it takes for everything to load in once we actually change the settings, right? It still hasn't loaded in, and there we go. So now it's starting to to load in, right? So there is a bit of a delay when you change settings for everything to load in, but once it's loaded in, there are a few subtle differences that we'll talk about just now, but shimmering persists in both modes, in both performance and quality mode. Now, if we just have a look at the trees there in the distance, you can see on quality mode, they do sway a little bit in the wind. You might have to speed it up to see that, right? But they do sway a bit. In performance mode, there's no swaying of foliage. Also, we do have a slight depth of field effect here on the gun at the stock, where on performance mode we do not have that either. And then foliage is also a lot more dense in quality mode versus performance mode, right? But there are some other subtle differences as well. If we pan the camera here to the left, just have a look at the metal chimney there. You can see that there's a lot more decals on the chimney itself, but also the tree in the background there, once again, it does sway a little bit in the wind, whereas on performance mode it does not. Sorry, it sways in the wind in quality mode, but not in performance mode, which is quite strange because banners actually are affected by the wind. It's just that the foliage does not move with wind at all in performance mode. Other than that, there are differences when it comes to lighting and shading. It looks a little bit more hazy on quality mode. The lighting has a kind of bloom affected. Sorry, I'm not a native English speaker. I don't know the exact terms for it, but if we have a look at a quality mode, just a different scene when we compare to performance mode. It looks a little bit darker. Once again, performance mode, it takes a while for everything to start loading in properly, right? But if I do not do a side-by-side, you probably won't notice the difference between performance mode and quality mode, especially if you are sitting about 3 meters away from your TV, right? So here we just having a look at the flowers again, the blue flowers just to the right of the gun. You can see it sways a little bit in the wind. When it comes to quality mode, performance mode, it's quite still. And then also the grate, the holes in the grate here, they seem to be a little bit more stable in quality mode than performance mode. So quality mode definitely has a higher resolution, yeah, and it is a little bit more evident in this specific one. I'm not sure exactly how it'll come across on YouTube, but over here you can once again see that the branches, they sway in the wind, whereas in performance mode they do not. But for reflection quality, I really do not see that big a difference. Nothing that I can talk to you about anyway. And those are pretty much the differences that I wanted to talk to you about. All right, now it's time to actually move on to the PC version. Alright, so here we are with Borderlands 4 on the PC, and the PC I'm using for testing is an RTX 5080 and a 14700K CPU that is paired with DDR5, 7200 megatransfers per second CL30 memory, and then also 32 gigabytes of it, NVMe PCI Gen 4 storage drive, and a Gigabyte Auros Elite Z790 motherboard. Alright, so all the specs or all the statistics are on the top left hand corner there. And I'm going to be doing the exact same run as I did with the PS5. And over here, you can see we're getting around 80-ish frames per second. I'm not going to tell you what the settings are just yet, right? We're running at 4K, but I'm just going to run the same route here. And the reason why I'm using the settings I am is because I'm targeting a consistent 60 frames per second. Okay. In the console video, I did not have this boss. I also did not have this gun because you do get pre-order bonuses on PC. I did not pre-order on PlayStation 5. Whatever, I did not see the need to. Anyway, so just going to run to that spot over there. But we're basically able to maintain 60 frames per second, right? It does drop below 60 at times. And you can see we're getting like 65 there. And if you enable VSync with Nvidia Reflex, it's an okay-ish 60 frames per second experience. But look at the frame times there, right? Even at 4K output, it's kind of rough. You can see that the frame rate does change quite a lot depending on where we are. But to be able to maintain 60 frames per second, let me just show you. I have to use 4K, right? And then with the high preset and DLSS performance. So 1080p internal resolution on the high preset to maintain 60 frames per second on an RTX 5080. That's heavy. That's very heavy because I'm going to show you a few things here, right? So let's start off with the Baddass preset. The high preset is not even the second highest. It's the third highest preset you can select, right? Baddass preset. Okay, so whatever. And let's start off with let's start off with DLAA. That's not going to go well. All right, you can see everything takes a very long time to load in. But this is also an issue on the consoles. Look at that. Look at that frame time. It's everything loaded in, right? So, okay, here's the thing. Unreal Engine 5 on the highest preset, it is like it's heavy, right? I'm not laughing at the performance here. The performance is kind of expected, Baddass 4K, like that's it. I've made peace with it, and I think so should you, because it's not going to change, right? It's not going to change. So 24 frames per second here, Baddass, and the game. No, it did not crash. I thought the game crashed. Okay, so it's a very, very rough experience, this. Okay, so let's just see if we enable DLSS here. I'm going to just do DLSS quality. I want to see it's doing some DLSS scaling here, right? So that gets us to 40-ish frames per second. That's actually not a bad jump. Just going to DLSS quality, and then if we do balanced, I'm just going to do some DLSS scaling tests. Yeah, right. Balanced got us nothing extra, like maybe 3 or 4 frames per second. And then if we do performance, let's just see. Okay, I don't think we're going to see 60 frames per second here at all on this preset. Okay, we can do DLSS Ultra Performance, which is 720p internal render resolution. Let's see. There we go. So 66 frames per second. I mean, we only need 720p. Not horrible. The stuttering is very, very bad though, and a lot of people have been complaining about the stuttering, as well as overall performance, right? Okay, but yeah, let's just say yes, it is the Baddass preset. It is heavy. Okay, so whatever. We don't play on the Baddass preset. Let's go to the very high preset and do DLAA. Right, so native resolution, native 4K. And once again, you can see everything takes quite a while to load in. And now we're still getting 24 frames per second at times, right? So it's not even that much better than the Baddass preset. I will say that the lighting looks pretty good, right? It does use lumen and it does use nanite, and it does look good. I do have to... Okay, that's bad. I do have to ask the question though, like, is it necessary in a game like this with cel shaded graphics, Borderlands, to have as realistic lighting as what you see here? I'm not so sure. I know that there are benefits or claimed benefits of running lumen, ray tracing, that kind of stuff when it comes to development. I just think that maybe lumen is not the best, or ray tracing is not the best technology to use in a game that looks like this, right? Okay, so we're not hitting 60 on high preset. We're not going to be hitting 60 either. Okay, as I showed you earlier, like preset scaling doesn't seem to work all that well, right? So even on the high preset, we're really not getting that much better. I mean, in percentage numbers, it's high, but in absolute frame rate numbers, it's very low. Okay, so it's really not making that big a difference to the experience for me at all. And then I'm going to just do the low preset quickly. Where's that? Okay, so medium and then low. Let's just see. So the low preset still looks passable. All right, so on the medium preset, yeah. Medium preset, 46 frames per second. Okay, we're not going to hit 60 frames per second with any of the presets. Maybe low, maybe not. And then let's do the low preset quickly. All right, this is pretty much as low as it'll go, right? So let's see if we can hit 60 frames per second, yeah. Nope. And now texture detail, like this looks horrible. This looks very, very, very bad. There's no foliage. There's very little textures on the ground. We are getting 56, 58 frames per second here. Right. the average went up because I was looking down at the ground. But we're not maintaining, we're not hitting 60 frames per second even in this specific spot, and the game just looks extremely bland. Okay, so like this is very, very disappointing. Now obviously there is frame generation that you can use, whatever. So I just think that probably the high preset would be your best bet, and then DLSS performance, right? That's where we started off with, and I just want to see. All right, so 70 something. This is kind of decent territory to start enabling frame generation. I know I'm in the options menu a lot. I'm going to try and make this video shorter, and I'm going to try and stick to that. Okay, so let's do, it says frames to generate 2 times. That's not correct. It's generating 1 additional frame. Okay. Now don't worry about the loads when we use frame generation. It's just the what's it called? Well, the flip chain model and the way RTSS captures frame times, whatever. Like it can't capture it 100% accurately. There is a way to get it to work. I just haven't implemented that just yet. All right, so over here, 120-ish frames per second. That's really not terrible. I'm going to just use the Nvidia overlay as well, because I want to see the latency. So we're getting 40-ish milliseconds of latency with frame generation enabled. It does drop to around 100 frames per second at times. Still a lot of stuttering, right? Stuttering is quite bad. Like, it's maybe not as frequent, but it can be prolonged. It can be quite severe. So just want to do 3x quickly. Just have a look at the latency numbers there. All right, so we're still staying at around 38, well, the high 30s, low 40s, unless it stutters and goes into the 50s. But I can, I don't know, I do notice a little bit of additional less responsiveness here, and we're getting 160, but we have to use, like, it's very heavy. DLSS performance at 4K, so 1080p internal resolution, 3x FG, and then we are getting 160 to 200 frames per second with a lot of stuttering as well. And then our last one I'm going to be doing is just 4x FG, and just want to see what the highest frame rate number is we can see here. All right, so 200 is on the table. Okay. Latency is still between 40 and 50, although I have to say it does feel like there's the latency is less consistent. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, just moving the mouse, it doesn't feel consistent. It'll be somewhat responsive now, but then right over there it jumps to 56, right? You do notice that in the responsiveness of the mouse. Okay, so that's it for 4K. Let's do a bit of testing at 1440p. Okay, so here we are at 1440p native Baddass preset using DLAA and 30 to 40 frames per second here. I do have Nvidia Reflex enabled here, so we're getting around 50 milliseconds of PC latency, right? And you'll see more or less that same number when we start enabling frame generation. Anyway, so 40-ish frames per second here. I'm going to do quick preset scaling at 1440p. So let's try the very high preset quickly. Very high preset takes us from 48 to 53. Where were we? 45 more or less. I'm just going to do this. So 52 frames per second. I'm going to leave that one up. We'll do the high preset quickly. I think we should be able to hit 60 FPS on the high preset. Question is, will we maintain 60 frames per second? That's, the stutters are, they're rough. It's actually quite funny because when I initially ran this first area before I started recording, there weren't any. No, the stutters weren't as severe. There were a lot of stutters, but they were not this severe. I don't know what changed. I'm using a capture card for my recordings, so it's not that. So they do seem to be shader compilation stutters, right? The shader compilation stutters because every time we open a container or something, it squishes it stutters. But if you wanted played native, 60 FPS is somewhat possible here. You just have to use the high preset, which I mean, I'm not against the high preset native with Lumen still enabled. I think it's a decent-ish enough experience. Just like you need a 5080 to maintain 60 frames per second at 1440p native, right? It's kind of rough. Okay, so let's try the medium preset. I know I said I'm gonna do the preset scaling quickly, and I failed already. Medium preset, like it still looks decent, right? There's enough foliage. The lighting still looks good. The textures, no, maybe not as good. I mean, sure, it's cell shaded. Not everything is cell shaded though, right? But I do see a lot of these issues, even on console, right? Where I don't know what exactly you call this phenomenon, but I do see that quite often in the ground textures. All right, so 70-ish frames per second on the medium preset, and then let's just try the low preset. And all right, did the game crash now? I think the game crashed now. All right, so the game crashed on me 3 times now at 1440p, twice just a crash to desktop, but then the 4th time it was a black screen of death. And upon investigation, I saw that I had virtual memory errors in the event log, saying that I'm running out of virtual memory, even though my C drive where my page file resides has about almost 200 gig free. So not entirely sure what's happening there, but also I linked those heavy stutters also to that same error. Whenever that error occurred, I had that massive stutter. So I'm just going to cut it here. I'm going to refund the game. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and as always, we hope to see you in the next one.